Welcome back to another episode of Maxwell Leadership Podcast. Our goal each week with this podcast is to add value to leaders who multiply value to others. My name is Mark Cole, and today, John Maxwell is bringing us a lesson. Not only that he's going to teach well, and he's been teaching for years, but it's a lesson, to be honest with you, that we're learning right now. We're applying right now in John's leadership, in my leadership. And this lesson is one that I know will help you too. Here's the question. How can we develop a legacy culture in our businesses or in our organizations? John's going to teach us today on how to do exactly that. He's going to teach us 3 C's. He sounds a little bit like a Baptist preacher today. He's going to give us 3 C's in an illustration, but really today he's giving us 3 things that will help us become better at thinking legacy, that thinking life beyond ours. Now, after John's lesson, my co-host Traci Morrow and I are going to give you some practical ways that you can apply what John has shared to both your life and leadership. If you would like to download the free bonus resource for this episode or watch this episode on YouTube, you can go to maxwellpodcast.com/succession. Okay, get ready. It's time to talk about legacy. Here is John Maxwell.
So today I want to talk to you about legacy. And the title of my lesson is A Leader's Lasting Value is Measured by Succession. I think that the best thing that a leader can leave people is a legacy. Other people to fulfill the vision and to live out the values that founder has started with. Peter Drucker in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, up into the 90s was known as the #1 management guru in the world. And I remember after one of my 3-day sessions with a group of about 20 of us, we were wrapping it up, and I remember him looking at us and saying, now, leaders, remember there is no success without a successor. And the most important thing you can do is leave a legacy. And I can still remember my conversation with Jack Welch, who's a neighbor of mine here in Florida before he passed away, who was probably recognized when he was the CEO of General Electric as the greatest CEO of that day. And I remember him looking and saying to me, John, don't put your legacy in organizations, put your legacy in people. And it was from him that I got the term, I want to have legs for my legacy. You know, the legs are people and the legs move, and that's what I want to do. How do we develop a legacy culture? You know, culture is all about behavior. You know, vision is what we see, but culture is what we do. So how do you and I develop in our company, in our organization, on our team? How do we develop a legacy culture? To teach this, I'm going to share with you 3 pictures, okay? And these 3 pictures will just visually help you understand what is needed in your life to have the legacy culture that you want to leave. And the first picture is the picture of a clock. And the clock, as I look at it, asks me a question, and that question it asks me is, what are you doing? You see, we look at a clock dozens of times every day. And the reason we do that is because we have a schedule to fulfill, and we got appointments to make and people to see. And so that clock kind of keeps us doing the everyday essentials. I mean, you know, okay, at this time I need to be there to meet with them, and I need to write this afternoon at 2:00. And it keeps us on schedule. The clock is a reminder that we don't want to let this day pass without making it a worthwhile day, and we want to prioritize our time. So when you see the picture of the clock and legacy, it's really talking about now, today. And I know we think of legacy as the future, tomorrow, but for right now, just let's stay right in the present. What am I doing right now, at this moment, to increase the legacy that I hope to have in my world? You see, today matters. And life consists of a lot of everydays doing the right thing. This is huge. Consistency is so underrated. And the reason I think that it's not appreciated and underrated so much is it takes so long. I mean, no one ever went to work for 1 week and showed up every day. And at the end of Friday, somebody came up and said, hey, we have a consistency award we want to give you. You came to work for 5 straight days. You're amazing. No. You see, consistency is only ever rewarded on the back end. But when you think of your legacy, you've got to think of today, right now, because today matters. So if you want to have a great legacy tomorrow, you got to show up today. Legacy is built one day at a time. One day. So don't despise the day. Utilize that day. Well, let me give you another picture that really helps you with legacy, helps me at least. The second picture is a picture of a compass. Now, when you have the clock and you have that picture, the clock basically says, what are you doing now? But when you have a compass, the question the compass asks is, where are you going? Because when you think of a compass, people why do they have a compass? For direction, to know exactly which path that they should take. When it comes to legacy, the statement is that people will describe your life in one sentence. And then, since people are going to describe your life in one sentence, pick it now. You see, what's amazing, when I see that compass, it reminds me that I need to be going in the right direction. And what I need to do is I need to be picking now what I want to have people say, at my memorial service. You don't want to die and then have people show up and they're trying to guess what you accomplished in your life. For me, my compass, my mission, my path that I take basically can be summed up in one sentence, and that is I want to add value to leaders who multiply value to others. That's who I am. That's what I do. That's what I'm committed. That's me. Wow. So I've given you 2 pictures of legacy. One is a clock. What are we doing right now? One is a compass. Where are we going? And the third one is companions. Who's going with us? In other words, when I take this journey, who am I going to take with me on this? This is huge. This is huge. So when you're thinking of legacy, you got to think of companions. I mean, who do I want to go with me? Who do I want to take the trip with me? In my book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, I talk about the law of the inner circle. Those closest to that leader, what do? They determine the level of that leader's success. Wow. And so therefore, I developed a list of questions that I ask the people that are going to take the legacy trip with me, my inner circle. Questions such as, do they live out good values? Are their values kind of like mine? I always want to do a values test. I'm looking for values compatibility. Another question is, the people that I'm bringing on my team as in my inner circle, do they have high influence with other people? In other words, if I bring them on, I want them to be able to influence other people so that we can lead well together. Another question I ask is, do they have do they have high giftedness? Are they gifted well in the areas, especially that would complete me or complement me? In other words, do they have gifts that I don't have? Can they lead well? Can they equip other people? These are just, another question I ask is, are they just a good fit? In fact, I have my inner circle members go do something socially, individually, with somebody that we're thinking about it, and then they come back and say, did you like them? I don't mean it's wrong if I'm 75. Do you think I just want to take a trip, at my age, with people that I don't like or that don't have my values? So that companion's question is really, it's just really, really important. Wow. So as I wrap up my teaching session on legacy, I just want you to know that that you should be preparing to hand that baton off to someone else. And by the way, you hand the baton off at full speed. Don't wait till you're old and you're no longer running fast and you're kind of staggering over there giving that baton, because anybody knows in a relay race, the only team that's going to win are when all of the runners pass the baton off at peak speed. That's really, really essential. So just think of the three pictures, and as you think of those three pictures, just simply say, hey, do I have a clock in my life that just keeps me focused on the everyday essentials, which will compound each day into something big? That's important. And by the way, do I have a do I have a compass that's going to make sure that, my direction is right? And then how about my companions? Are there people that I love? Are they people that I care for? Are they people that, wow, I look up every morning and say, hey, we get to take the journey together. So as you're thinking of a legacy, just, hey, keep that clock, keep that compass, keep those companions, just keep them in front of you. If you ask those three questions and you keep those three pictures, I promise you are going to develop a legacy that people are going to want to pick up on, follow, and help you fulfill.
Hey everybody, Ryan Leak here, and I've got some exciting news for you. Day to Grow is just a few weeks away, and it's happening on March 19th in Orlando, Florida, and I cannot wait to see you there. I'll be talking about my new book, How to Work with Complicated People. And let me tell you, this message has the power to change the way you lead and live. And it's not just me. John C. Maxwell is going to be in the building, Tim Tebow, Stephanie Chung, Jesse Itzler, and an amazing lineup of speakers will all be there pouring into you. But here's the thing, seats are filling up fast, so if you haven't registered yet, now is the time. Don't wait. Make the decision today to invest in your personal growth. I'll see you, my friend, in Orlando, Florida on March 19th. Let's grow together.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. I appreciate our team that just kind of continues to put things in front of me, but I love this quote by Jim Rohn that the team gave me. Jim Rohn said, all good men and women must take responsibility to create legacies that will take the next generation to a level we could only imagine. Certainly, Jim Rohn has done that for many of us. He's certainly done that for John. He's done that for me. John Maxwell has done that for me. Traci, you're a business leader. You're a co-host with me on the podcast. You co-host a monthly call with John. I think it's true for you too. How we inspire and surround ourselves with people is literally the best thing that we can do to build a legacy and then certainly leave a legacy. So I'm super excited about today.
I'm excited about today too, because I think a lot of leaders, so much of us aren't maybe thinking about succession. And so starting to maybe plant this seed for some of us to think, wow, should I be thinking about this? And so let's jump right in. Before we even get to those 3 C's, I've got a few questions for you, Mark, as we process through what you are personally going through right now in your personal leadership. Yeah. And so I guess if I'm listening to this right alongside of all of our friends in the audience, I'm wondering, when does a leader begin to think about succession? Is this something that you should be thinking about from day one, always having that in mind? Or is that something that you should start thinking about sort of maybe at halftime, or maybe when you're 5 to 10 years out thinking toward retirement and passing that baton?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So John and I were in an environment just in the last week of recording this podcast. It was a high capacity roundtable. So just think about high capacity when somebody like John Maxwell calls it high capacity. These were incredible women and men with a lot of potential, and some of them living out that potential. The same question was asked. John, you and Mark are doing a lot about succession. You're doing a lot about baton passing. When did you start thinking about succession, and when did you start thinking about how to equip Mark in this idea of legacy? And John started laughing. He said, before I even knew Mark. I started thinking about it before I ever knew them. In fact, what he said was, which was very profound, Tracy, you've heard him say this. He said, I was thinking about succession before I had anything to succeed. Before there was anything to do, he said, here's why. I call it things like work yourself out of a job, give away tasks so that you can do what only you can do. He said, all of those are succession-minded things. And so every one of us should start thinking about succession today if you haven't already. And it's not necessarily the act of finding your replacement or the intention around setting the next leader up, which is the way we normally define and design succession. But succession needs to be, John talks about it in the lesson, it needs to be the things that you consistently do that is worth repeating even when you're gone. The things that you consistently do that needs to be repeated even when you're done. And so I think John, when he started writing books, when he started helping people achieve their success or their best version of themselves, he was thinking about succession way back then. I certainly am now thinking about succession. I'm thinking about it as a G-Paw. That's the name my grandkids call me. I'm thinking about it as a dad. What do I want to leave our kids? And you know, Tracy, let me say this. Most of the time, we think about succession or legacy and we write an epitaph. And I bet you many people listening to this podcast has been challenged by somebody to write your epitaph, write what you want people to say when you're gone, which is a morbid thought, by the way, but I've been through that.
Yeah.
But isn't it true that when we do sit down and really do that, it's less what we want them to say than what we want them to continue in our namesake? It's more the character I want my kids to be than it is the way that they think about their pops, you know. And so I would just challenge all of us today, take this lesson and begin to plan out your succession by the things you're going to consistently do day in and day out.
Boy, it's kind of like you're looking at my notes and the questions that I have for you. Because I do have my next question is sort of for the person who is in the number 2 seat that is getting ready to come in behind the leader and step into the number 1 seat. I'm just curious, how do you differentiate between stepping into the legacy of what is being entrusted to you? So John passing on what he wants to be continued on in his name, while also thinking about your own legacy and what you want to be carried on in your own name. So it's 2 legacies that you're carrying. So how do you differentiate between those 2 things? And how do you carry both of those 2 things at the same time while trying to think about succession yourself while you are stepping in? Well, are you getting me?
I do.
You know, okay, let's talk about that.
So I go back to a teaching that I do about how to become a successful second man or to be in the second chair. And so just real quick, the lesson is simply this. I became a great second chair leader when I killed my agenda and adopted John's agenda. That's when I truly became his second man. Now, I'm a type A leader. I love and have vision and have aspirations, but I truly became a great second man when I killed my agenda and made John's agenda my agenda. Something interesting happened over time, and the agenda that I threw out to adopt John's agenda began to surface back up, and I found over time that John's agenda that became my agenda all of a sudden became our agenda, and I found things that was on my original agenda that now was on our agenda. Now in succession, we're truly in a place to where John's agenda that became my agenda is now starting to become my agenda that's becoming John's agenda.
Say that twice.
Say that twice real quick, right? Here's what's interesting about that, and it's true about legacy. If I'm really where I'm supposed to be, and I do believe that I am, no questions on that, I haven't had questions about that in many, many years, then John's legacy is my legacy. And my legacy is John's legacy. And our legacy is a combination of what makes him unique and me unique. And so I don't feel like, as a good second chair guy, that I am putting my legacy on hold so that I can extend John's. I feel like I am fulfilling my legacy by extending John's. Now, I don't know that every second person, and certainly we quoted Jack Welch a little bit earlier. I'm not saying that every person has the alignment that John and I have. I think that would be ludicrous for me to say, actually. At the same time, how you are extending someone else's legacy is your legacy. How you are working as a second person is your legacy. How you are embracing your day-to-day responsibilities is your legacy. It's not some euphoric thing that you get to a certain level of success and all of a sudden, I need to start thinking about my legacy. No, there are paupers that have died with greater legacy than some of the most popular people in the world, because it's what you do over time that is worth repeating that makes you have legacy. And so I would just challenge all of us. I happen to be a second chair to a very big first chair. Some of the rest of you are a first chair in a different context than how big John's first chair is. But all of us, first chair, third chair, fifth chair, 100th chair, we are carrying our legacy with us. We're living that legacy out no matter what we do.
I love that. And it's pointing back to what John said, and it's remembering that the things that you do consistently that are, and what you just reiterated, that are the things that you want to remember, what are passed on, whether that's whoever's, it's what's worth passing down to that next generation of leaders in the organization. Okay, let's jump to the 3 C's. So he first starts out with a clock, talking about what are you doing? The clock is the reminder that you don't want this day to pass without making this a worthwhile day, that today matters. So when did you, or when does a leader start, letting go of that youthful mindset? You kind of answered a little bit earlier, but the shift from how far can I go to really thinking about that space of succession. And I know you said you should be doing things when you're young, that you should be thinking in succession. But sometimes I think even when you are young and you're figuring things out and you're failing forward, is that really a time where you should almost be taking notes to yourself, that you should be thinking, because things change, maybe something that you did in the first 10 years of your career, in the last 30 years of your career, the last 10 years of a 30-year career, 40-year career, 50-year career, maybe aren't things that you pull those first 10 years towards the end and pass on. So should you continually be analyzing and assessing and taking notes to yourself? How does a leader keep track of that so it can be passed down to the next generation?
As you were talking and asking that question, I wish I'd have done some homework. Sorry, podcast listeners, I didn't do my homework. The dog ate it. If I would have thought about that, I would have done the homework. And it's a book talking about decade leadership, the decade mindset. And it's talking about, in our lives, the 20s are all about the party and the perception. The 30s are about settling down. The 40s is about conquering. The 50s is about maintaining. The 60s is about rejoicing, reflecting. The 70s is about resting. It just goes on. And I just butchered that. So those of you that are familiar with it, I butchered it because the dog ate my homework, okay? So sorry. But here's what I'll tell you. I've always felt like, as a leader, when I read that content and I've heard it taught, I always felt like I was a decade behind. I felt like that because of my 20s and just some character shortfalls that I had, and how much I had to work in my 20s to become respectable in my 30s. I always felt like I was a decade behind financially. I felt like I was a decade behind with leadership opportunity. I just have always felt like a decade behind. Now, come to find out, this book tells us that we all feel like we're a decade behind. Because life's only understood on the back end, right? So we can only make sense by looking behind us at what happens rather than in front of us. And so I think that's a typical thing. But to your question of the clock and how we look at legacy things, I don't think it's ever quick enough for us to intentionally begin to craft what we want to leave our loved ones, what we want to leave our leadership assignments, and what we want to leave as a legacy. I just think we're always behind. What I would say to that then is, okay, now that you figured out you're behind, don't be a behind and get going. Okay, just get going. Because while I may be behind. I told somebody the other day they're just about to be 50, and they realized that they left a dream that they had in their 20s. They left it, and it never left them. And so life got heavy, life got busy. They went and had kids, and now they're coming back, empty nesting, realizing I never let go of that dream. And I went, and it was to be a medical professional, and I went, okay, let's go. It's time. And they went, it's too late. And I went, it's never too late. It's never too late. You may not make the money somebody else makes. You may not get finished with the schooling that other people get through with. You may not be sought after as the expert in your field, but you can never leave the dream behind if the dream doesn't leave you. And so I would say that here to all of us. It's not too late to wait on your legacy or to forget your legacy. Put the plan in place now.
I love that. That somebody needed to hear that today.
Yeah.
I believe many people, I think, need to hear that. I don't think we say that enough to people. So moving on to the compass, he talks about people describe your life in one sentence. Do you have a legacy sentence, Mark?
Man, so I know that I want it to be, he inspired me to be more than I thought I could be. Now that needs work, but if I had one thing, it would be to succeed at my life's purpose. Well, my life's purpose, as many on the podcast that are regulars know, is to motivate and inspire people to reach their full potential. So if I want to motivate and inspire people to reach their full potential, the way I would want you, Traci, to describe me, or the way that I would want Jake here in the studio to describe me as, wow, you know what? Mark inspired me to reach a potential I didn't know was within me. That's what I want my daughter to say. That's what I want my family to say. So that needs some work, no doubt, but that would be close to that sentence that I would want people to say. You know, I don't want them to say, man, he had a great work ethic. I do. I don't want them to say, man, he worked hard. I do. I don't want people to say, man, he gave me a lot of money. I try to give away money. I hope people say, man, I reached another gear of success because of that guy.
I love that. I'm curious, do you think as we're going through these C's and John is talking about thinking toward legacy and planning and the clock and the compass, does everyone have a successor, Mark? Every leader?
So, yes. So everything rises and falls on leadership. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. We leave a legacy whether we intend to or not. Maybe that's a third statement that John needs to give, is you're going to leave a legacy. Now, the legacy may not be a good taste. It may be a bad taste. Your legacy may be easily forgotten, which is a legacy, by the way. So I would say that yes, by the fact that you have been placed in a community with a stewardship responsibility to influence that community, because everything rises and falls on leadership. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. You will leave a legacy, whether you be intentional with it or not. I do believe, I know some people, this is morbid. I didn't mean to go here, Traci, but I know some people, because of my profession before I started with John, which was in a nonprofit ministry, I know people that left the earth at 8 or 9 years of age, gone. Cancer, accident. I mean, I can still remember the impact that those kids had on me. I can still remember, I could give you 3 names right now of people, kids, that I had to be a part of their memorial service, that I can still think of the impact they had on me. 1 in 4 years, 1 in 6 years, 1 in 9 years. You're leaving a legacy, and you're leaving it on the people closest to you more than anyone else. So that's why John's success principle, gang, is so important. What is success as defined by John? It's when those closest to you believe and respect and love you the most. And I will just tell you, start at home. Start figuring out your legacy with those closest to you, and then let it grow and build out from there.
Yeah, I think that's an important one for people to hear, because I think we pour so much, leaders pour so much into what they do outside the home and can forget that. So thank you for reminding that. Okay, so the last C is, the first 2 are really all about the logistics and thinking things through and timing and all of that. But the third one is really what legacy is, and that is people. The people you leave your legacy in, companions, who you're going with and who you're taking with you. And so John gives a whole list, and I know that this really stuck out to you, but you can take my question or you can just trash it and go with whichever way you would like to go. But I'm curious about a couple things. Number one, within this season, with such close proximity to John, do you have yet an inner circle that you've chosen to keep close to you that is your personal inner circle that you are pouring into, that's like your team, that you're thinking next, like succession? Or is right now, because it's not yet the full baton pass, that this is John's people that you are around? And then if you wouldn't mind, if you're up for answering that question, talking about the baton pass off, because I think people think about a baton pass as like in a track meet. I know I certainly do, because I ran track in high school. I wasn't super fast, but I ran this sport. But you pass the baton. It's a momentary thing. You might run together for a little bit, but the baton goes from one hand to the other and it's passed and it's done. But in actual succession, what does the baton pass off? It's not really like a track meet. It's actually a process of the pass off. So if you would talk a little bit, if you're interested in what that might look like, or just trash it all and go in the direction you want to go.
No, I love the way you're framing questions today. So this inner circle question, well, first let me answer this the way that it should firstly be answered. I am absolutely in tune with the people that I need to be leaving legacy with. And it is a 18-year-old University of Florida first-year student. And I quit trying to leave her a legacy of cheering for the Georgia Bulldogs because I lost that one. But she is there. And it's definitely these grandkids that we've been incredibly blessed to be such a part of their life. It's definitely my oldest daughter. It's definitely my family. And I hope to do, because of this lesson today, I hope to do a better job of going and really being intentional. My inner circle, to your question, so let's talk work or calling or succession or success, whatever little bit I've been successful at carrying that on. I absolutely have a inner circle. John Maxwell would be in my inner circle. I find that as you ask me that question, Traci, I found that question was really, my inner circle is about extending John's legacy, which I do believe, as I answered earlier, is my legacy. But that inner circle is really about the best transition and working to make John's legacy extend through me and others, which will be my legacy, but it's really quote unquote John's.
Yeah.
And I've got people, Traci, you're one that has called me on a number of occasions, said, Mark, I am committed to your success and you being extremely successful. You love John, you partner with John as much as you do me, but you would be one that keeps me in prayer, that keeps me in mind, and keeps me in check of what I'm doing with my legacy. You're one of those. I do have some people that I feel very strong that they're called to how I finish my life, not finish John's life. That's very important to me, and I need to do a better job being intentional with that, and I will, because of your question. There's others that I have looked at certain times and say, man, I need to work myself out of this responsibility or out of this job. I need to have this person up and running and making sure that it's a good handoff in the next 6 months, 6 years, that number. And so I definitely have people that I would see from that succession handing it off. But even as you ask that question, podcast listeners, I hope that you were struck, as I am, with Traci's question of really going deep and saying, hey, what do I want extended beyond my life? Who do I want to extend that? And how intentional am I in being empowering to those people that I want to carry that? You asked the next question that we could go for the next 30 minutes on.
It's a big one.
And that is succession being more of a transaction than it is a process or a give and take. John and I mentioned this earlier in this podcast. Recently, we were at a high capacity event and there was a lot of questions, as I mentioned earlier, about succession. And John and I have always looked at succession not as a handoff zone to hand me the baton. There's been moments at his 75th birthday, right around when he gave this talk that we heard today live, that he handed me the baton, and it was kind of this transactional moment. We called it a season of running together. The longer succession has went for John and I, the more I understand that there's some laps in his succession that I should be running and he should stop running. There's other laps that he needs to keep running, and I need to go over and grab the water and be the water boy because he's still got a lot of run in him. And I think the best successions are really understanding the mode or the way the succession is going to happen. Because I don't think it's ever a transaction. I think it's always a almost an impartation. And I'm not trying to get mystical with my words, but it's a true succession is almost a spirit transfer or a DNA transfer, in my opinion. So let me explain. I think that there are successions that are immediate. They happen and there was no intentionality on it. It just, boom, it happened. I think that there are successions that are crisis oriented. It has to happen. Something happened.
Right.
The person made a mistake. The person passed away, God forbid. I mean, just something tragic happens and boom, there was no plan, but it was already meant to be. I mean, the person was in the waiting and they just stepped right in. And so it really was a succession without any intentionality. Then again, there's the succession that says, hey, we're succeeding, but there's going to be no intentionality to it. It's just going to be sudden, but it's not going to be without intention. It's just going to be sudden. By the way, I'm strong in my faith, as you all know, and I think these three biblical examples of succession are there. And for those of you that care about that, those of you that don't care about it, go take a real quick lap and come back in 30 seconds, and I'll keep going. Those of you that really want it, it's the succession of Joshua and Moses. Joshua and Moses planned for years for that succession. Joshua was ready as Moses faded off because Moses knew years and years that he wasn't going to go to the promised land. And so he, with great intentionality, he set Joshua up. The second succession is David to Solomon. David and Solomon knew that it was Solomon, but somebody came in and tried to take over the throne. And they had to do it immediately before David was really ready. And to be honest with you, before Solomon was ready, because of a crisis in the kingdom. So that one was without intentionality, but it was very clear. And then the succession happened, and then the plan came. So the plan came with Joshua and Moses. The plan came after the succession with David and Solomon. The third succession in Scripture is Elijah to Elisha. Everybody knew, but nobody would talk about it until after it happened. And so that was this planned succession, crisis succession, and immediate succession that's happened. And so I have found that as you go through that, you've got to work together in a way that still fits with everybody playing their part. And in our story, John has got an active, for many years to come, I believe, an active role in how the succession and the legacy happens in a great way.
Interesting. Well, thank you for sharing that, because I think for especially the three versions, not just sticking to the version that's yours, because I think some leaders might hear that and be like, oh my gosh, is that what I have to do?
Correct.
And it's not going to be the same. So I think if you're one of our listeners and you are hearing the three different versions, it's up to you to determine what will your succession look like. So thank you for sharing that, Mark.
Yeah, for sure. And I wish we had more time because I could really build that out more because I'm living it, and it's year after year living it. I do want to quote Jay. Jay listened to the podcast, How to Create a Growth Environment. He said, I found the story in today's session on how to create a growth environment very relevant to my own experience during the last couple of years. I appreciate the connection and perspective as I work toward high road leadership. Jay, that's why we're vulnerable. That's why we give our stories, is because of that. Hey, I am encouraging you lately, give us a rating on whatever podcast player you listen in on. Let us know how well we're doing. If we're doing well, give us a 5-star. It helps us. It drives us up to the top of ratings and rankings. And by the way, if you'll give us a comment like Jay did today, we'll try to acknowledge it. If you have a question, send us a question. We'll try to answer it here with myself or John or one of the co-hosts. And then finally, if there's something we can do better to better serve you, please let us know, because we exist. I say this every time, we exist to bring powerful, positive change to your world because everyone deserves to be led well.
Hey, podcast listeners. Many of you listening right now would probably love the autonomy that comes with owning your own business or becoming a coach that helps other businesses succeed. Well, we have a phenomenal strategy where you are 100% in control of your own business, earning income on your own terms, and have access to the people, tools, and resources you need to build a thriving leadership development business. When you become a Maxwell Leadership Certified team member, you join a global community of entrepreneurs led by our expert team of mentors and faculty, including John C. Maxwell. You'll also get one of the top leadership certifications in the world next to your name, giving you the boost you need to get started. Visit us online at maxwellleadership.com/join the team to find out more.